good morning, good afternoon, good night, good evening, however you're watching, wherever you're watching, however you're listening, whenever you're listening, wherever you're listening. It is the Bet Online Salute Detroit podcast with the Bearded Bandits.
There you go. There you go.
The Bearded Bandits. Little disappointed we did not get 100 thumbs. Unless Ryan, hey, let's talk. I'm going to ask Ryan this because Jamal's going to say no. The people who put multiple thumbs in there, does that count?
You can do like commenting thumbs.
And the commenting thumbs. Because the goal was to comment 100 thumbs and we'll get Jamal to get a beard. And so people put like a bunch of thumbs in their thing. So
I still don't think we got 100 even with all the multiple. So I haven't looked back. I haven't looked.
No,
we'll leave that up for debate.
Jamal.
I'm sort of crushed. You know, there's a part of me that's relieved and a part of me that's crushed that, you know, more people don't care about my facial hair. You know, that's, you know, the vanity in me is devastated right now. So,
I mean, if you count, if you hit the like button, that's a thumb, and we got 101 likes. So technically 101 likes. But we didn't get 101 comments of the thumb. But maybe Jamal, people thought that the like counted as
the like counted. I see.
You're hitting the thumb.
We're hitting the thumb. We're hitting the thumb. We're hitting the thumb.
Well, there you go.
It's so I mean, what do you think, Rye? I mean, it sounds like it was kind of the Chiefs offsides play last night. So how would you shake that down?
I'll leave that up to you. I would say it's your face. Leave it up to your wife. Maybe is probably a better answer.
Yeah. We're not going to get into the Chiefs offsides play. We could go deep into that thing and how both the referee and Tony messed up, but we won't get into that. Maybe we can at the end. Well, maybe we'll touch on it at the end. Let's if we have time.
Well, you know, Rye's got some strong opinions there. You know, Rye's a little riled up about it, so you know we can talk about it at the end.
Yeah. Let's talk about it at the end. Okay, let's do that. All right, good deal. So today we're getting into the most important position on the field, the quarterback. So we're going to go over the depth chart with the quarterback. We know Caleb's gone, and we're going to go ahead and pull this up. The quarterbacks get something special because they're the most important. Look at that. You guys like that? That's pretty good. I think I did a good job. So
well done.
Quarterback is most important on the field. On scholarship, we have Miller Moss and Malachi Nelson. So I just realized this, that Miller Moss is 7 and Malachi Nelson is 8, like 7 and 8. That's pretty cool. But Miller Moss is Miller Moss is going to be a senior, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
Miller Moss,
graduate student, senior, absolutely.
Yeah, he graduated early too.
Yeah.
Miller Moss is going to be a senior. Malachi Nelson is going to be a freshman.
Redshirt freshman.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, they just say freshman. I understand where you guys are coming from though, but so this is the quarterback depth. If you go through a year, and Jamal, you're our resident historian. What was the year when every single quarterback got hurt? I think it was like
the year.
Are you talking about when?
Which one, Coach? You talking like? I mean, are you talking 2020, or are you kind of going all the way back when you were there? Like, you know, 07 was the year everybody got hurt. Remember with Booty, and then Sanchez had to come in, and you know, it was kind of a revolving door.
But Mark didn't get hurt.
Yeah.
Booty came back, but I think this is when the Jackson Dart coming out party happened. But like he got hurt, and then who was the starter though?
Yeah, it was
Slovis. Yeah, Slovis.
Slovis got hurt, and then Dart came in, and that was there was a lot. I mean, then I remember, JT Daniels too, right? JT Daniels got hurt. That got Slovis the job. Then Slovis got hurt. That's what then moved it to Jackson Dart, and that was actually over a 2-year period.
Dart was later. That year was when Matt Fink then came in. Remember
Matt
the old Fink over Utah game?
That was 2020, and Fink had that huge game against Utah when they, when SC blew Utah out.
Yeah. So
19 or 20. Yeah.
That was 20. Yep.
So if that happened, if knock on wood, if Miller Moss was to get hurt, we'll get Malachi Nelson. Then Malik. After that, there's nobody. Like the other guys. One quarterback was 17. He's like a redshirt sophomore. They have a quarterback that's number 38, and they have a quarter. They have just the rest of them are just walk-ons, just practice bodies. This is one thing that I do like. That's what's going to happen with these quarterbacks in 2 weeks. I think both of these quarterbacks are going to get a lot of reps. The fans are expecting a win. I'm not. And I think this is where Lincoln Riley is correct in this point. This is if this was baseball, this is a bullpen game. If I'm Lincoln Riley, I understand you have to play a game and this and that, but the season's gone, right? I will play every 2 series Miller Moss and Malachi Nelson. I would get them as many reps as I possibly could get them. And let's start the competition now. Miller Moss will be my number 1, of course, in there, but we need to see what Malachi Nelson could do. And he is the future of this program. This is a Lincoln Riley recruit. This is a kid that this shit has a bunch of upside. So let's put him in the fire now. Over to Miller Moss. I'm a big Miller Moss fan. I've always been a Miller Moss fan. The only problem that these 2 quarterbacks are going to have is that they're going to get compared to Caleb. And they're going to always say, well, he's not Caleb. He's not Caleb. You're right. But guess what? Baker Mayfield wasn't Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts wasn't Kyler Murray. You know what I mean? Kyler Murray wasn't Caleb Williams. Like, these quarterbacks that Lincoln Riley had in the past, even Pat Mahomes, right? If I'm not mistaken, Lincoln Riley was the OC for Pat Mahomes, right? Or am I wrong?
I think he was gone already. Cliff Kingsbury was there, but Lincoln was already the OC at OU. Yeah.
Okay. So he was gone.
Oh, but Cliff was there though. Yeah.
Yeah, but right, Pat's not those guys. But so like, we're going to see a different style of play from these 2, but we're going to see a style of play that is beneficial and effective, and these dudes should be able to win games. Here's the issue. There's not enough in this room right now, right? I can't go into the season with 2 quarterbacks. This is a game where I don't care what you say. One thing you cannot coach is injuries. One thing you cannot prepare for is injuries. You don't know when they're going to happen. You don't know how they're going to happen. And you don't know how severe they're going to be. So this room definitely needs depth. I will say this, though. I think this is time for Miller Moss to come out and become the starter. And Malachi needs to wait his turn. Because he waits his turn, he'll have a sophomore, junior year to show what he could do. And probably if he does well and his talent reaches where it needs to go, probably be a Heisman Trophy candidate, right? That's the goal for most quarterbacks and every offensive player. But I think it's time for Miller Moss to shine. I am not worried about the talent that's in this room right now. I am more worried about the depth. I'll pass it on to Ryan. What do you think about this room?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to add someone through the portal, whether it's one of the big name guys that we'll talk about probably in a bit, or just a guy to come in and compete and be a vet presence, because you can't go in with 2. Still definitely add someone. And there's no one in the 2024 recruiting class, no quarterback, so they'll add someone. But yeah, I mean, I like the room. Malachi obviously dealt with some injury stuff throughout the year, and so from what reading between the lines of what Lincoln Riley has said, he's kind of not as far advanced as they would have hoped, not in a bad way, not that he's not worked hard or progressed, but seems to be maybe a little behind what they had hoped. I think they're real bullish on Miller Moss and what he's been able to do, and just how he leads and the way he practices and stuff. So I'm excited to see what he does. If it was me, coach, what I would do is, this bowl game is Miller Moss's entire game. I think this is his game to really go out and show. Obviously, USC's been missing a lot of players. Defenses, who knows what the defense is even going to look like. Brendan Rice is declaring for the draft, so he won't be there. Taj Washington most likely will. He's been practicing, so he should be there. Obviously have most of the receiving core there, but what the offensive line going to look like? So, going up against a stacked deck. But to me, this is Miller Moss's game to really shine out. I totally agree. I'd love to see Malachi get reps, but at this point, until the guy transfers in or whatever, this is Miller Moss's team until proven otherwise. just based on what has transpired throughout this season. And unless Malachi makes a huge jump in the spring, which certainly can happen, but that's how I would think about it. Now, if they shock the world and go out there and are blowing out Louisville in the first half, then you give Malachi the second half to go out there. But if this is a competitive game and it's a close game throughout, or USC is losing throughout, unless they're getting drubbed, opposite thing. So whatever a blowout may be, then you can make a change. But if it's a close game, I'm letting Miller Moss, handle it and see what he can do in this kind of competitive atmosphere. But Malachi, I think, is still super talented. I know a lot of fans are excited to see what he can do. But I think at this point, from what we've heard and what we've seen in practice, Miller's ahead of the curve based on him. So to me, I'm giving him everything to prepare to be the starter for next year.
Jamal, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree, and it's I love the picture too, Ro. I mean, it feels like picture day at Harvard Westlake Middle School, day, 8th grade, Harvard Westlake. This is, both these guys just look so young. And I agree with Ryan. I'm very excited to see Miller Moss. He's worked so hard in the program. He's one of those guys who just loves being a Trojan. And this is kind of his opportunity to see if he can solidify the starting job going into spring and really have an opportunity to genuinely be the starter in the 24 season, which in many ways would be so poetic that someone who cares so much about USC is ushering in this program into the Big Ten, when you really kind of have to rebuild culture from scratch and identity from scratch in a new conference. So excited to see what Miller Moss can do. I think regardless of who's on the field, Louisville's a very good football team. They obviously held Florida State to 16 points, and that was a very competitive ACC championship game the last time we checked in on Louisville. So Miller Moss is going to get an advanced placement course here. He's jumping into the deep end. The first day of school is not, an easier class. It's not study hall. It's full on kind of AP Calc for Miller Moss going into this game in the Holiday Bowl. So excited to see what he brings to the table. I think he's going to be very prepared. I think he's very cerebral. I think he's going to make the right decisions. I think the question is going to be athleticism. How big is the arm? How well can he perform off schedule? What is the versatility in the pocket? What is the upside? And so I think everyone's really excited to see that. And with Malachi, again, it just goes to show you that you can be a 5-star, very decorated player, but there is a pretty significant jump between high school and college. And he's, by all indications, what Lincoln Riley has said, he's needed to sort of grow into his body physically, speed of the game. We've seen this with other quarterbacks this year. We've seen it with another quarterback across town in Dante Moore, very similar type of situation. So it'll be interesting to see how much Malachi can develop this offseason. I'm excited to talk about who else USC can bring into the portal, but it also becomes kind of an interesting conversation with name, image, and likeness, with transfer portal. If Malachi Nelson gets beat out for the job in the spring, does he think about transferring? I mean, if you go in and spend $1.5 million, $2 million on a quarterback in this particular cycle, and we'll talk about some names, you're not spending $2 million to sit a kid. That presumably that is going to be the starter. And if Malachi Nelson kind of gets beat out again, does he stick with the program, or does he potentially go to greener pastures where there's an opportunity to play? So there's kind of a double-edged sword here. On the one hand, we're talking about how does the number 2 go to 3, go to 4, and you create depth. But after spring, this 2 could even be down to 1, and you have to bring in more folks. So it's sort of that double-edged sword of the transfer portal.
So, speaking on that, and I want to address this too. Miller Moss is a true Trojan. Like, this is a guy who understands the culture, stuck it out, could have left, went anywhere, could have been a Kenan Slovis, could have been a JT Daniels, but he stuck it out, saw it through and through. He's graduated with USC degree. He's going to be a Trojan for life. He's a part of the Mafia. He'll always be able to get a job with that degree. So these are the kind of kids that you do need in your program. Now, let's address the portal. So, how do you address the portal with the quarterback situation? Because we're saying
we can do this now, so I can see your face better.
Yeah.
I think everyone knows the two guys.
So, how do we address the portal with the quarterback situation? And I've been thinking about this for the past couple of days now. Do you address the portal? I mean, do you address the quarterback situation with the portal? Do you go get a solid backup? And if you go get a solid backup, I have a guy in mind that could be a really good solid backup. he won't lose you games, and he's a really, really good temporary fix for the time being while your starting quarterback gets better if you need to do that. And for me, that guy is DJ Ungalele, right? If you go get DJ, he won't start. He'll be a leader. He's had experience. He's played college football for a long time, and if you have to put him in the game, you're not falling way off. You know what I mean? You're recovering. You're not recovering, but it's not like a big drop off in talent. And you have somebody there that could get you a couple of games while your starting quarterback gets better. So let's address that. My question to you guys is, if you do get a backup, who do you get as a backup in the portal that's out there in the portal? And do you think it's a good idea to get a backup in the portal? Right. So let's just start there, and then next we'll go to the starters. So let's not put the cart in front of the horse. We'll talk starters next in the portal. So backup. If you were to get a backup, who do you get? And do you think it's a good idea to get a backup? And do you go with Miller Moss? Let's start with I'll start with Ryan.
So this is so hard with this new transfer portal and NIL because, in my opinion, pretty much any QB specifically that's in the portal is in the portal because they either want to start somewhere or get a boatload of money or both. And so it's very hard to have a QB, especially a QB that has starting experience, to then say, okay, I'll just go be a backup at SC. And SC is going to be like, okay, do we want to give you this bag of money to come be a backup? So it's hard. It's kind of a weird scenario because I think no matter what, when you're getting a guy in the portal, you kind of are giving them some NIL money, and B, you're promising them at least a really solid opportunity to start. In my opinion, I think DJU is probably only looking for a starting spot now, based on his pedigree, based on, the starts he has had at big time schools in Clemson and Oregon State. So do I think he's better than Miller Moss? I mean, we haven't seen enough of Miller Moss for me to say no. But is USC willing to go do that? If we're talking strictly to a guy that I think could come in, be in the room, has experience, I think Miller Moss probably has a higher ceiling, but this guy could come in, maybe not be super expensive. I would go for Grayson McCall out of Coastal Carolina. I think he's got a bevy of experience. We saw him play, UCLA this year. He's had some good games over his career and could come in and at least be a real nice depth piece, could start games if needed to, and I think have some success there. Obviously, I don't think that's a guy you go in to say, hey, this is our future of this season. It's going to lead us to the college football playoff. But I think he can, if you're going in that backup role with the potential to start, he at least pushes your other guys further because of experience and can add something to there. So of all those names, if we're looking at that, probably Grayson McCall.
What do you think, Jamal?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, Coach. And I think you have to sort of go into the transfer portal now thinking that's where you're going to get your 1-year starters, your sort of 1-year rentals, and to potentially be starters. And your backup room is really filled with the 4-star, the 5-star, the blue chip kids that you're getting directly out of high school that are either going to redshirt or that first year after the redshirt. And I think that's how you sort of build depth at the position now moving forward. I know, Coach, you talk a lot about how would I build out my roster? How much am I going, high school kids? How much am I going transfer portal kids? I think that equation really holds up very strongly when you talk about the quarterback room. I think you go for your starters now with these experienced vets that have big time experience, looking to get paid a significant amount, and you're looking to them to really kind of compete for that starting job. And then your depth pieces is your pipeline. I don't know if you necessarily go into the transfer portal thinking backup. I think you're going in thinking, what's my plan A? What's my plan B from a starter standpoint? If you strike out there, then you go down to kind of plan C, plan D, plan E, where those guys could potentially be starters or potentially get beat out, but you're bringing the depth to the table. Specifically with DJU, I really like him. I love the analogy there, Fred. I think he obviously between Clemson, between Oregon State, had a tremendous year. Big kid. He can run the ball. He can throw the ball under the right situations and circumstances. But this is also where personality fit matters. There's kind of 3 things you got to look for in the transfer portal. You got to look for scheme fit. You got to look for money fit. And then you got to look for personality fit. And in the case of DJU, by all indications, he's a softer spoken kid. He's more of a lower key guy. It's one of the reasons why he picked Corvallis, Oregon over some of the other programs that he was looking at. I just worry about the spotlight and the scrutiny that comes with being the USC quarterback. I think he faced something very similar at Clemson, and I don't think it really meshed with his personality. So I agree with you on the field, kind of scheme fit, money fit, that'll work. But I think from a personality fit standpoint, I don't know if it's quite there with DJU and USC led by Lincoln Riley here in 24.
Do you think the fact that he has a chance to come back home and play his final college football season at home, do you think that could play a factor into it over the media scrutiny and everything like that? Do you think that will outweigh it?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a really good point, Coach. I think that could be potentially the cherry on the sundae. If you've kind of, you fit, the base of the cake kind of all checks out and fits. And I'm just not sure that's the case with DJU. I think for these kids who are down to their final year of eligibility, hey, it would be really nice if I could come back home. But I think that's sort of for a kid that really sort of enjoys talking to the media, being on the front lines, and he can kind of play up that story a little bit. I think in the case of DJU, as should be the case with all of these prospects, when you're down to your final year of eligibility, it's all about what is the best situation for me to get to the pros. I mean, that's ultimately what you're doing here. And then if that doesn't work out, then you decide what you want to do, with your post-football career. But for me, if I'm DJU, I'm thinking, where is the best fit that can kind of showcase my abilities? I would think it's a team with a little bit of a bigger offensive line. I would think it's a team that really emphasizes play action. And I think DJU, given his size and frame, is more of an under center quarterback than he is a shotgun guy. So none of those things really scream air raid to me. I could potentially see him in a really nice kind of system, potentially even in the Big Ten. I could see a Wisconsin,
Iowa,
kind of getting his guys going. I could even see DJU come in and compete. If McCarthy decides to declare, Michigan's a really nice fit for his skill set, and some of these other bigger teams that really utilize play action.
I got you. Iowa too. Iowa's perfect. Like everything you described, it's in middle of nowhere, not a lot of scrutiny right there. So
if you truly just want a cheap backup, go get the pig farmer, Bryson Barnes out of Utah. Beat SC at the Collie, and I think that'd be a fine backup.
Yeah, that would be fun too. Before we get to the next, I want to let you guys know that Sutra Tour is brought to you by Bet Online. We got bowl season. Bowl season's coming up. It's starting on Saturday, the 16th. So if you want to put in your Super Bowl, not your actual Super Bowl, but a Super Bowl parlay, 86 games, I believe, or something like that. Some crazy number of games. Bowl Mania that ESPN says. Go and throw that parlay in on betonline.ag. Put a promo, believe that's BLEAV, and we will give you a 50-cent match bonus. Bet Online, where the game starts. So, now, the portal, and, oh, man, who said it? Nebraska coach. Come on, guys, help me out. Matt Rule. Matt Rule said, if you want to go get a guy, a transfer quarterback, he's going to cost you $1 million, $1.5 million to $2 million, and he has to be a guy that has to play right now and be a game changer. There are some game changers out there in the portal, right? There's actually a game changer that is in the portal right now, played in the conference. Cam Ward is a big name in the portal right now. Cam Ward will work in Lincoln Riley's offense because we've seen a quarterback similar to Cam Ward in Lincoln Riley's offense and had great success. Won the Heisman, right? Did he win the Heisman? Yep. He won the Heisman. Cam Ward reminds me a lot of Kyler Murray. Oh, man. Kyler Murray, kind of the let's run around, make something happen. Not like so much like Caleb, but Kyler Murray does it to a very extensive level, right? And he does it in the NFL too. Like, I'm going to run around and make something happen. If it's not there, I'm going to run and use my feet. Lincoln Riley had success with Kyler Murray at Oklahoma, and Cam Ward will fit. The issue is those dudes don't do very well under pressure. So once those quarterbacks start getting sacked, and just watch Kyler Murray when he gets a lot of pressure on him, his game kind of fades a little bit, and then he'll run around and make a big play. He'll spark back up, and he'll start getting sacked again. He's like an up and down guy, and I think that's kind of Cam Ward a little bit too. That style of play, I'm not high on it. The guy at Kansas State, you guys told me his name before the show. Will Howard. Thanks, Ryan. I watched Will Howard because he was one of the top guys that were being mentioned in the portal. I actually like Will Howard. Will Howard is a big body that could move, right? 6'4", 6'5", 230 pounds, but he could 240. Also 240. He could create stuff with his feet. My question is, how well does he work in the air raid? That's a big question mark because that's the basis of your offense. The thing about Lincoln Riley is able to work with any quarterback that he gets, and he can make them successful. Same with Cliff, and Cliff is there right now too. So I think either or will work at SC. The fix needs to be up front in order to make the quarterback work. So if you do go get those guys and you spend that money on them, I think it will work out. But my question for you guys is, what's plan C? Right? What if these guys don't come? Who is the third guy on the board? Right? So my question would be, how do you guys feel about these two quarterbacks? Do you think they will work at SC? And then if they decide not to come to SC, who's the next guy? Right? Who's the third guy on the board? I'll start with you on that one, Jamal.
Yeah, no, and that's a great setup there, Fred. I mean, for me, we'll start with Cam Ward. He's sort of the prototypical Lincoln Riley air raid quarterback.
100%.
When you're talking about 6'1", 207 to 212, very nimble, very agile. I can totally see the Kyler Murray comparisons. He also reminds me of Jalen Hurts when Lincoln got him after the many years at Alabama. He's kind of right in between Kyler Murray and Jalen Hurts for me, because with Hurts was a little bit thicker at 223, but he was mobile and could throw a great deep ball. And that's kind of Cam Ward. The ball comes out really fast, really high velocity. I watched him live at the Rose Bowl when Washington State played UCLA. There's a real zip to his ball. And he's got a big arm and he's very nimble. I think the concern with Cam Ward, to your point, Fred, is he does get happy feet when the pressure is on. And UCLA sort of owned Washington State in that game from a front seven standpoint. He was running for his life most of the game, and it started impacting his decision-making in a way that we've taken for granted the last 2 years with Caleb Williams' poise. But then B, how much is that intermediate passing game where he's going to have to kind of go through progressions, has to kind of get into that 12 to 20-yard range? How much of that can develop? Because he's really good in terms of taking the ball and extending plays and running a little bit. He's really good down the field. He's really good on kind of just those running back screen passes, those wide receiver bubbles. But I think the growth is going to need to be how he can stay in the pocket as well as how he can get his intermediate passing game. But that's Lincoln Riley's specialty. Lincoln Riley is the PhD in developing quarterbacks of that size in the air raid. So to me, that's plan A for USC because he just fits so seamlessly into what they're doing. Will Howard is a little bit more of a non-traditional guy. This is a 6'5", 242 guy. He, 4 years at Kansas State. Cam Ward was 4 years as well. He was 2 years FCS and then 2 years Washington State. Howard is the bigger guy, the stronger guy, a little bit more of a resilient guy. He's not going to have the happy feet in the pocket. He's going to stand in there tall and make some things happen. I worry a little bit about athleticism with him. He's a big kid. He can move, but, I worry a little bit in terms of kind of quickness and agility when kind of that bull rush comes. And then the second thing for me with Howard is just him as a pure thrower overall. He reminded me a lot of just, one of those gamers in the Big 12 that's going to find a way to sort of move the ball. But there wasn't necessarily anything kind of mechanically sound or really strong about Will Howard kind of consistently. So Will Howard's going to be a little bit more of a project for Lincoln. And I think where they go in terms of plan A, plan B, Ward to me is plan A, Howard is plan B. But with Howard, you got to make sure that you're stronger up front. So to me, it's one of those things where it's a little counterintuitive because he's the bigger guy. He can take more of a punishment, but he's not going to be able to sort of roll to the outside in the same way that a Ward can. I think you really need to make sure that you're beefing up that offensive line so Howard can his sort of game can be sort of inside the tackles and he can sort of work from there in terms of his reads and his progressions. So it's going to be very telling who USC gets. And I think based on who they get, they're going to really need to sort of address the offensive line regardless. I think then plan C, Fred, if unfortunately it's 0 for 2 there, I think there's a pretty significant drop-off at the transfer portal position. And then I think Lincoln's focus has to be a lot more on in-house development with Miller Moss and with Malachi Nelson. I like the McCall sort of selection by Ryan. I think there's other guys that you can sort of bring in, mid-tier major guys, other guys in the conference to sort of bring in to push these guys. But then you have to sort of retool your offense a little bit more potentially around more of a run-heavy air raid attack, kind of one of those years that he did with OU in between some of these quarterbacks. So I think it's going to be interesting to see it shakes out. But for me, it's Ward A and then Howard B.
Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, I'll work backwards to forwards, I guess. And yeah, plan C, I think, is then you're all in on Miller Moss as your starter. If you add guys just out of the room, you're looking at, like I said, Grayson McCall. You could do a DeQuinn Finn out of Toledo, a Tyler Van Dyke out of Miami. Like maybe those are some bodies at least you get in the room that can compete and have started games in college football. So there's some experience there. I mean, they've started more games technically than Miller Moss, but if Moss is your ceiling, you go that way. B, I don't need to say too much more because I think Jamal hit it all, but I think, Will Howard's plan B. I think it's interesting that Lincoln Riley flew to Manhattan, Kansas to meet him personally. I think that does show that he does see some definite upside there and some potential of him in the system. And it would be kind of fun to see that body type in this system just because it is so different. I mean, I agree. He's not as athletic in terms of quickness, but I mean, he had a 70-yard touchdown run last year, had like almost 400 yards total rushing, 9 touchdowns on the ground. So he can at least move the ball with his legs if needed. He's definitely not going to be Caleb Williams or Kyler Murray or any of that, but does have some elusiveness there that can move it. So it'd be fun to see him kind of what Lincoln Riley does with that body type in this. But I agree, you do need to really get the trenches right in order to kind of change that style of play in a way. And it's not going to be, which you need to do anyway, going into the Big Ten. So maybe that would force their hand to kind of get bigger in the trenches if you're having a quarterback of that nature. And then, plan A, Cam Ward, I think is definitely the one they're trying when you look at, pushing all the NIL chips in. I'm sure it is Cam Ward just because of how he fits in the Lincoln Riley system and what he would be able to do with just his skill set, with his, experience and the style of play that he has. And just for him, I mean, if you're either of these quarterbacks, you got to be thinking, if this is my last year, I mean, there's no better coach that's going to get me ready for a high NFL draft pick. I mean, I get maybe the NIL might be bigger at Miami or NIL might be bigger at Texas A&M, but if you're a Cam Ward or a Will Howard, I mean, you got to think, if I want my stock going from 5th or 4th round to potentially 2nd or 1st if I blow up, like there's no better place to do it than with Lincoln Riley at USC. So that's hopefully some bargaining chip I'm sure that they're using, is just the resume that he's had with past quarterbacks that have transferred in.
The only thing worries me about those two is that they're at the USC of the East Coast, right? So, like, when you think of USC of the East Coast, that's Miami all the way. Private school, bunch of boosters, money's not an option. Like, so that's a little thing that worries me.
And they're both there, like, in back-to-back days. It's crazy.
Like, so, I mean, that worries me a little bit. You put a kid in Coral Gables and then you take them on a trip to South Beach. The next thing you know is, like, they might both commit. So that's
imagine going from Pullman and Manhattan, Kansas to Coral Gables, Florida. That's
So
LA too. That I mean, that's a nice jump too.
LA's too. So I think they're playing off of each other, right? So if one goes there, like, well, I might as well go here, like, because they, like you said, they're trying to rise their stock and get their last year to play. So hopefully it works out. I think whoever we get, I really do think whoever we get, Lincoln Riley isn't worried about them, and I think he could put them. You have two. Let me put it like this: you have two really good quarterback coaches in USC's program that speaks the same language, that are really good friends, that understands what's going on, that could get Cam Ward or Howard in a very good situation. And I'm more intrigued to see Howard in an air raid system than I am to see. We've seen Cam Ward before. I want to see the challenge of Howard. You know what I mean? Like, you have a big guy that could scramble, but he's not going to bust one. But he can move the pocket and do those sorts of things. I'm more intrigued to see that than I am to see Cam Ward, because we've seen that before. Like, I just want to see something new. I want to see how good Lincoln Riley really is. I'm putting the challenge on him that way. So That'll be interesting.
You know what's interesting, Fred, is that it's also going to be, obviously it's going to come down to these kids and what's the best package for them. I think Lincoln Riley offers a ton, particularly for quarterbacks in terms of their readiness to the NFL. It's also a little bit of an acknowledgement from Lincoln Riley about how resilient the air raid is going to be from day one in the Big Ten. Because I think that who he ends up getting, I think, remember, this is a neutral game with LSU. It's going to be at Michigan. There's Penn State on the docket. All of these teams, very big, nasty, talented, physical front sevens. And LSU is first game of the season. And so part of it is also going to be how much does the air raid grow and evolve over the course of a season for a quarterback in terms of their knowledge and their comfort and their performance in the Big Ten, and how resilient is the air raid to the Big Ten from day one. And so I think that's going to be a really fascinating look at how Lincoln Riley thinks about this. I think it's one of the reasons, Ryan, he flew to Manhattan, Kansas. One is I think it shows he still has very strong ties to the Big 12, given Will Howard's at Kansas State and sort of is monitoring sort of really good players from that conference. But B, I think he's sort of acknowledging that maybe I need to sort of change it up, particularly if I'm not where I need to be at the offensive line. And Cam Ward is going to be kind of running for his life a little bit in 24. Look, this is where we're really going to feel the absence of Caleb Williams. I mean, Caleb Williams is a once-in-a-10-year type of quarterback at the collegiate level. His poise, his ability to extend plays, his ability to stay kind of on schedule in terms of his throwing motion, his mechanics, his ability to look down the field in the face of tremendous pressure is something we are going to feel next year at USC, regardless of who these quarterbacks are. I know between Baker and Kyler and Jalen, there was some great performance, but there is going to be a drop-off at quarterback next year, regardless of who's going to be there, no question about it. You're talking about the best player in college football the last 2 years. So to me, I think that's why Lincoln is sort of so eager and intrigued by Will Howard, because I think he's willing to trade some upside for some downside protection in terms of a guy that's going to stand in the pocket, maybe take some punishment in a more physical conference, and a guy who you can run with sort of in between the trenches and do a little bit more kind of RPO, but up the middle. And I think there could be some really interesting wrinkles there. Whereas a Cam Ward, the tape is out there. When he doesn't have a great line, there's a lot of happy feet. Interceptions can happen. He sort of ditches his mechanics. So I think it's just going to be fascinating to see that. I think from a fit standpoint, Ward to me is plan A, but he's also a little bit more of a project. He's sort of lower downside, higher upside. For me, Will Howard is higher downside, lower upside.
You got anything else on that, Ryan?
No, I the only thing I'll add, and I only know this because I wrote about it, but Ward, I found this interesting, and everything you're saying is correct, so I'm not disputing that. But against top 25 teams, he was, I think, 73% completion percentage, 323 yards per game, 8 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. So did play well against top 25 opponent, but all that stands true in terms of, Morris escaping the pocket, not standing tall in the pocket. Was that
this past year, right? Because, I mean, they had a 7-game losing streak this year after the 3-0 start. And he had a pretty poor game against UCLA, pretty poor game against Arizona. There were some clunkers in there. So,
and then they beat Wisconsin at the time was ranked, but yeah. I know. I thought that was interesting. I didn't necessarily. I was like, oh wow, that's a better than I expected, to be honest. So
yeah, he had the big game that Ward had this year was Oregon State. When they were up 38-30, they won that game 38-35. He had 300 plus and 4 touchdowns. So half the touchdowns there were in that game. They really kind of raced out on Oregon State. I think Oregon State wasn't ready for that speed and that kind of spread. And then they tried to come back. That was his kind of signature performance. And then it teetered off. But I think, with Lincoln Riley's tutelage, he's the prototype, right? He's the prototype Lincoln Riley air raid guy. There's just no question about it.
Let me ask you guys this before we move on or finish up, Coach, if you don't mind. And I don't think this will happen, but hey, for the sake of discussion, this is a podcast. Why not? Jamal, I'll ask you first. Is there any world where SC goes after Dante Moore?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, this is transfer portal. Okay. This is, everyone's open for business. It's a marketplace. I don't think that he's very high on USC's list right now because the thinking is, hey, we have our own Dante Moore and Malachi Nelson. And so they're similar build. Malachi's even 1.5 inches taller than Dante, kind of similar release, similar arm strength. So he doesn't sort of jump off the page. in that regard for what's in USC's room already. But if you strike out on Ward and Howard, assuming Dante Moore is still on the board, absolutely, because then it falls. I mean, Dante Moore, heck of a lot more of an upgrade in terms of a depth piece than McCall or any of these mid-tier guys. I mean, he jumps very, very quickly into your top 3, top 5 if Ward and Howard break down. But, this is the world we live in where, teams can kind of jump in at any time and go from there. So absolutely, I think their entire focus is on these two guys. But if they strike out, Moore would probably jump to the top of the list.
I don't see it because, like you said, they already have a Dante Moore. And so the question would be, I mean, I get you create the competition, but then you're stuck with Dante Moore, and what Dante Moore really does fizzle out, right? Malachi Nelson, you still have a upside that you really haven't seen yet, right? And you still have 4 years for him. So I wouldn't want to risk losing 4 years of Malachi Nelson compared to only having 3 years of a Dante Moore that I may never get.
Fred, there's no guarantee that Dante Moore would start. I'm just saying that, you bring him in and to compete, right? I mean, you're not guaranteeing a starting spot because, again, I think it also shows the marketplace of the transfer portal. I think it's kind of creating its own economics here. I think now for the next 2 weeks, I think you have a quarterback that's going to be in the price range of $1.5 to $2 million. The Wards and the Howards and some others. Once those guys are off the board, I think then the nil price for, whoever's kind of at the top of the list after these guys commit is probably going to be half that, maybe a third of that. So do you take a flyer on Dante Moore for $500K or $750K? It's sort of insane that I'm sort of saying these words in college football right now. But do you take a flyer for $500,000 on Dante Moore just to push these guys moving forward? That's how these athletic departments are going to start thinking moving forward. How much is in my collective? And how much am I willing to take a flyer on a guy if he's not going to be a starter? And what's the going rate there?
And the Decide guys will always tell you this because every time we start talking pros, I'm like, why pay that amount of money and you go get him at a better rate, right? So I don't think Dante Moore is worth $500,000. He may think he's worth $500,000. I don't think he's a $500,000 guy because to me, right, when you start tearing it, like you're saying $1 to $2 million for a starting quarterback. So then you're looking at $750,000, $750,000. $750,000 can still end up being your starting quarterback that just doesn't have that notability yet, or just doesn't have the reps to end up being Jaden Daniels, right? Dante Moore has enough film to where it's like, yeah, do we really want to do this, right? And you do get the coaches that are cocky and it's like, oh, I could fix him. I don't think he's fixable. I think he peaked in
rough. This guy went from top 3. I mean, the kind of the future of UCLA's program to just broken. My goodness, Fred is just shoving him aside. Fred. I think in his world, I think he should have redshirted the way Malachi. I mean, I think if Malachi started, I think Malachi would be going through the same trials and tribulations that Dante did. Game would have been a real too fast for him at the start. I don't think physically he would have grown up, quite into his body just yet. So I think that it just goes to show that that first year, unless you truly are an absolute prodigy, it's probably a good idea to redshirt that year. So it's interesting.
And it also shows when you redshirt at SC, you still want to stay. You redshirt at UCLA, you're ready to bounce. I'm just saying. I'll just leave it at that. Hey, so I just want to let you guys know that and in 2 weeks, SC will be going down to San Diego. When you go watch the game on Fox 11, don't forget to get yourself a Fight on Pale Ale from your local vendor by Stone Brewery. Get your Fight on Pale Ale. Watch the Trojans play Louisville. It's at all your local vendors. Fight on. Real quick, let's have a little conversation here. We talked about it at the beginning of the show. So,
Coach, real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before we end with that, let's give reaction on the Coach N siren quickly. I feel like we got.
I forgot about that. I'm so sorry.
We got to hit that.
Actually, we need to hit on two things, and I completely forgot the defensive lineman that came in too. We
can do it quick.
Yeah, USC hired the North Dakota State head coach, Coach Entz. I think it's a good move because you're bringing in championship culture, right? And when you look at the line of North Dakota State coaches, they're actually doing a pretty good job at this level. This may be a stepping stone job for Coach Ince. I think eventually he might end up as a head coach somewhere, group of 6. Miami, Ohio. I live in a house with a Miami, Ohio alumni, and her Red Hawks are doing great right now. North Dakota State guy. You know what I mean? Like those guys understand winning. They understand bringing in culture. I think that was a great. It's so crazy because it's like we just griped about it all year, and everything we said that Lincoln needs to fix is like he's checking the boxes constantly. Boom, boom, boom. He's checking this box. Our 2 main boxes is the honesty gaps and the media training. So hopefully he fixes those things. But like he's trying to fix the culture. He's bringing in championship coaches. Like he's bringing in players that are bigger in style. Like I'll touch on this real quick. They just signed a 6'5", 290-pound defensive tackle, right, from Vanderbilt. I don't remember his name per se, but he was one of the top guys. Nate Clifton. He was one of the top guys in the portal, right? So like they're checking all the boxes and doing all the right things. So I'm excited for it. The one thing I do not like is that, and I get it, they had to do it because of recruiting, and the early signing day is coming up in 2 weeks. He had to get out and recruit. His team is in the middle of a championship run. Now he's gone.
Well, he's still there, actually, which is even crazier. He's staying through the playoffs.
Right. I think they should have announced it after they either got disqualified out of the playoffs or after they won the national championship. It messes with players a little bit. Like, he's not going to be here. It messes with him, believe it or not. Yeah. It does mess with him. So I think they should have waited. So I don't think Lincoln is doing a very good job with his media training. But I'm excited for him to come in. It's a guy that's going to help. I think it's a guy that's going to help Lincoln Riley because this is a guy that's won national championships. So it's a guy that he can lean on, like, what do you think we should do culture-wise and things like that to win. So I'm excited for it, and I hope it works out. Go ahead, Jamal.
Yeah, no, I love it. I absolutely love it. I think this is a home run hire by Lincoln Riley. Ince was 60-10, 5 years as head coach of North Dakota State, 2 FCS championships, played for a third, and then was the DC, prior to that. So he's been 10 years at North Dakota State. Before that, Northern Iowa. I think it's a win-win situation completely. You've got a guy with head coaching experience who's going to go into that linebacker room and approach that room and kind of that the rest of that front seven with a head coach's mindset in terms of scheme, in terms of philosophy, in terms of pedigree, in terms of approach. So I think this was a slam dunk hire. I love that Lincoln Riley thought outside the box here and went for a kind of head coach experience at an FCS level. North Dakota State is the Alabama of the FCS. So anyone you can sort of pluck off of that tree is used to winning, used to preparation, used to attention to detail, used to competing at the highest level. So to me, this is a phenomenal get when you sort of team him up with DeAnton Lynn and start building out this staff. So I think it demonstrates a level of urgency with Lincoln Riley. I think it demonstrates also a creativity with Lincoln Riley that he's going for it. Look, we're paying him $100 million a year. And when you pay somebody $100 million a year, Lincoln Riley's getting $10, $11 million a year. What's the difference between that amount and a $6 or $7 million a year coach? Everybody wants to win. Everybody has expectations for their program. You're paying a premium for speed. So the idea that, they're still rebuilding and they got to go find it and all of that, that's not an excuse when you're paying $10 to $11 million a year for your coach. It's like any investment. The more you're putting into it, the more you expect that return to close quicker. You're paying for speed. And so this is now year 3 of Lincoln Riley. I think he finally understands the urgency of how important this year 3 is. And I think he's hit the offseason out of the park to this point and understands. I also like this idea that he's sort of gone away from, hey, I inherited such a mess. People don't realize it. This is the first season that we were 6-0 since, a couple of years. This is the first season we were competing for a conference championship for a couple of years. I'm glad he's steering away from that narrative because that just fell on deaf ears. We're paying for speed. We're paying for premium. There's no more excuses going into year 3. So this was a home run hire from my perspective with Lincoln Riley, and I really appreciate the creativity. The one critique I have is how much of this was Lincoln Riley and how much of this was DeAnton Lynn. Was this DeAnton Lynn's hire or was this Lincoln Riley's hire? Now, it's a very good hire, but I think long-term, if he's not going to let his DCs sort of hire their staff, and reports were that was kind of an issue with Jim Leonard. Now, I think DeAnton was the absolute right hire. how much of that sort of control element is going to kind of get in the way of sort of long-term success of having a real lineage of coordinators. Because it's, the blueprint here is Nick Saban. He loses coordinators every year. He refills them. Alabama stays on top year after year after year. Look, a DeAnton Lynn is probably on the cusp of a head coaching job with a good year. Entz, with a good year, is probably on the cusp of DC at a place like Minnesota or Iowa or what have you, given his Big Ten pedigree. So you're going to have to retool. So allowing your coordinators to sort of build out their staff and be empowered, I think, is going to be important. So I think it was a home run hire. My only critique was how much of it was him, how much of it was DeAnton Lynn, and what's the better approach long term.
Yeah.
Ryan, how do you feel?
No, I agree. I won't add too much. I think it's a fantastic hire. Anytime, North Dakota State is like at least in recent memory, the most storied program in FCS, and you get a head coach from that program to be a position coach, not even your DC, to be your linebackers coach, and you slap on an assistant head coach of the defense title, maybe for some pizzazz, and I'm sure they gave him a nice pay bump, which helped, and sure. But he said he had a press
for sure better weather, Ryan. He's for sure has better weather.
Hey, I've been to Fargo many times, and yeah, LA is quite the upgrade. Not in housing prices, but in everything else. That's for sure. So I didn't watch his whole press conference, but today he had a press conference addressing the Fargo media, the North Dakota State media, and basically just talked about how, obviously he's going to say this, but how USC is just one of the blue blood storied programs. Like, how do you say no when they come calling, kind of thing. So the only thing I'll add, because I think Jamal said it all. I don't need a rehash. I just think it was a great hire, the pedigree, what he brings, the winning culture. But to me, this almost felt like, in a way, hiring the DC and waiting. Like you mentioned, Jamal, like he could be a DC at this other school. To me, this feels like if DeAnton Lynn is a 1-year DC and then go get the head coaching job, well, now you hired Entz, who's been a DC for 20 plus years.
That's a very good point.
Coach for 5+ years. Then he just takes over the DC role here at SC. So that kind of felt like the DC and waiting, that as long as they have the same, philosophy and the same mindset, then now you have 2 guys on your staff that can kind of do the same job. And if you lose one, well, great. You're not restarting next year because you already have the guy in waiting.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a very good point, Ryan. Absolutely. You're building a pipeline. You're building a succession plan from now. And if that is in fact the case, I think it's a home run hire. Again, and I like to joke with Ryan because Ryan's not an Alabama guy, but North Dakota State is the Alabama of the FCS. So when you get the head coach
100%
of, you're essentially getting, I don't want to say the Nick Saban because he didn't sort of build North Dakota State. He kind of inherited it. But, you're getting the Alabama pedigree at the FCS level. So there's going to be an inherent toughness that translates.
Yeah, definitely.
100%.
I agree 100%. Before we check out, let's talk about this real quick. So last night, we have to talk about this. And I got extreme. And there's not enough information. I will say this. There's not enough film out for this. And, Ryan, you can relate to this because you played the position. So last night, Chiefs and Bills, we'll just debate over this real quick. Chiefs and Bills. Kadarius Toney gets called for offensive offsides, which is actual call. Patrick Mahomes, you have to line up on the ball. You're offsides, and it's an actual call. Like, that's embarrassing that a professional football player doesn't know that. Kadarius Toney gets called for offsides. I saw a clip today where he actually does check with the ref, but the thing I did not see was the ref, and a lot of people don't know this. So here comes the schooling session. There is a signal that the ref gives the receiver to tell him either he's on or off the ball, right? So when you come to the line and you want to be on the ball, you point at the receiver. And then the ref gives you a signal back. Do you remember that signal, Ryan? He pats on his leg. Yep. He hits his leg, and he tells you to line up on that foot. That's the signal the ref is supposed to give. It's a signal. That's the official signal. Like, I looked it up and everything today. That is the official signal for receivers to tell them that they're off the ball. If a receiver is coming to the line and he's off the ball, that's the official signal of him telling him that he's on the ball. If the receiver is coming to the line and he's off the ball, the receiver is supposed to put his hand behind his back, and the referee gives him a thumbs up. That is the official signal. That is the signal that you're supposed to give as a referee. It's not even the referee. Actually, as an official, here's a little lesson too. The people that are officiating the games are not called referees. There's only one referee. The rest of them are technically called officials, or you go by their name: line judge, side judge, back judge, all that. So that's also a little lesson for you guys, just in case you didn't know that. There's only one referee on the football field, and that's the white hat. Anyway, so I saw a clip where Kadarius Toney did actually check, but I did not see if the referee told him if he was on the line or not. So to me, I feel like that it's a mistake by both Kadarius Toney and by I don't know if it was the head linesman, or I don't know the new name. It's what do they call him now? I don't know. I don't know if it's a mistake by the line judge / head lineman, but I think it's a 50-50 mistake. He should have got him lined up on the ball. He should have told him, hey, you're not on the ball, and lined him up. But I didn't see on the film if he gave him the signal or not. Ryan, let's start with you since you're the former wide receiver. What do you think? Who do you think the blame is on that one?
I mean, it's on Toney. I mean, he was offside. So, it's interesting. I never listen to sports talk anymore. I'm rarely driving or whatever, but on my way to dropping my daughter off this morning at my mother-in-law's, I was listening to ESPN radio, and John Perry, the ESPN rules analyst, was on. And he was saying, like, it's not a call that in his 15 years of officiating, he may have called it twice his entire time. It's not a call that he has seen called often, but he said this, and he doesn't like the call, but he said this offseason, they put an emphasis, sent the video to all the teams, all the officials, that this was now going to be a thing. Now, I don't know. I think it's been called. I think everyone's obviously breaking this down 100 times over because of it. I think they've called it like 8 to 12 times. I can't remember the number, but it's like more than it's ever been called this season. So, it sucks for KC in that moment, but I know I never played in the NFL. I never played college. I wasn't very good in high school, but I did play. I played some varsity. If you check with a ref, you actually have to wait for the ref to tell you you're on or off. And I saw the clip you're talking about, he's running to the line, waves to the ref. He's not even set yet. He just looks over because it's just like second nature as a receiver. You look over, you look at the ref, but he's not even set. And then he all of a sudden turns his head back and sets. So he may have not even waited long enough for the ref to give him the actual assessment of if he was on or off. So, it sucks for KC, but he was clearly offside. Do they call it often? No, but it's similar to other, I think, penalties called in the game where you could call holding on every single call if you wanted to. Right. It's kind of subjective. They decide when they want to call it. He threw the flag before the touchdown, so it wasn't like they flew it afterwards. It was when the ball was snapped, so it wasn't like they were changing the outcome there. 12 men on the field. Does that affect the outcome? Buffalo had 12 men on the field against the Broncos. They got to re-kick the field goal because of it. So this saying like it doesn't affect the play, like Pat Mahomes is saying, is come on, it's the rule. It sucks, but maybe your receiver should learn to line up on side.
Well, I will say this, and I will say this. My cousin was like, he should line up on side. It's not that easy to line up on side, even though, like you say,
yes,
there's a reason. Well, there's a reason why you guys check with the ref. If that was the case, there's no need to check with the ref. There wouldn't be an official signal for you to tell you that you're on side. It's not that easy to look down and be like, am I on the ball or not? Like it's harder than you think. It's not.
I did it for 4 years.
I got you, but I could put you out there. 10 times, and I guarantee you 10 times your original lineup, you'll line up off sides because you think that you're on the ball, but you're a little bit too far. You may be too far back because it's
the only thing I'll push back on that a little bit is it's not hard to be like, he was like past the line of scrimmage, right? Or like on the ball. When you're checking as a receiver, because you can only have, a certain number of guys on the line of scrimmage, no matter what, you're still behind the ball. Like the center has the ball, you're still behind. But if you're on, you're technically a foot behind the ball. If you're off, you're like 2 yards back. So you're checking more like, hey, I'm the guy that's supposed to be on the line. Am I good? Like you can see if your like freaking foot is on the line of scrimmage where the ball is. Like that to me is easy. It's more so like, can you tell that I'm the guy off, or can you tell that I'm the guy on? That's the only thing I would say to that.
Right, but you still need to check and line up. That's why they put the foot there, and that's why they pat their leg like this is where you need to be. Because, like I said, we could put anybody out there. Even that's why they still do it in the pros. Like it's pretty far. It's still like 20-something yards. You know what I mean? Like most of the times it's about 17 to 20 yards. That's a long distance to guess if I'm exactly on the line. That's why they have that there for that existence. That's all I'm going to say. It's not that easy. I know Kadarius Toney was a little bit closer. He was extremely far off sides, but for most receivers, that's why they do have the check. Like you said, but you are identifying, are you on or off the line? But when you do point, that they always tap that leg and say, hey, this foot right here is the line of scrimmage, and you line up off that foot, and you most likely get the thumbs up. So that's just how it goes. Jamal, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with, I understand both points. He was offsides. I think the tragic part here is, why this is getting so much attention is what the play ended up being. It was just such a remarkable play with Kelsey in the lateral and completely impromptuing it. I mean, and I think that's where, Mahomes' reaction was so strong, because I think he was crushed that, it ended up kind of shaking out this way. And all for naught. It's not in the history books. It's not an official play. And then B, because it's the Chiefs, right? I mean, it's Mahomes, it's KC, it's the hunted. So anytime they're going to get upset, anytime they're going to whine a little bit, it becomes this whole story. Look, we saw it for 20 years with Tom Brady and the Patriots. Mahomes is the face of the league. The Chiefs are America's team. There's no doubt about it. And so anything that they do is always going to be more magnified. I mean, just think, if this was the Chargers instead of the Chiefs, the narrative today was like, oh my God, the Chargers could actually move the ball on a play. It would have nothing to do with, what the outcome was, or pick, any other sort of mediocre team. But the fact that it's Mahomes, the Chiefs, they're the hunted. They're, and that's what you get with being the alpha. And so that's the fun. I mean, look, it's the Chiefs and everybody else. They're having a tough year right now, but look, the AFC is still going to go through Mahomes. He's going to have something to say about who the champion is. And the most remarkable stat to me is now with this loss, they're 8-5. He's year 6, that this could be the first year he actually plays a road playoff game. I mean, how insane a stat is that? Wow. So look, Brady was the face of the league for 20 years. Now it's Mahomes. So it happens when you're the face, everything becomes a big issue. But I agree with you. He was offsides.
What were you going to say, Ryan? You were trying to say something real quick.
Oh, no, I was just joking. If it was the Chargers, the narrative would be, wow, Staley can't even coach his players to be on side. That's what the narrative would be.
Yeah, it was crazy because on Sunday I called the Inglewood Fire Department and said there was a dumpster fire, and they said they said it was a non-emergency, but I think it really is. They asked me who started. I said Brandon Staley, and they got a little bit upset. So I want to see a scrimmage between the Chargers and UCLA, because I mean, the final score there, the Raiders Vikings 3-0, that might be kind of higher scoring than that game. That might be a 2-0 game, the way it's going.
Rough.
All right, guys, I appreciate you. I think it's been a fun one. Thank you guys for listening. Like always, Jamal, Ryan, we did another one. Wrapped it up. Thursday, we're moving to the other side of the ball. This is going to be fun. We're going to have a lot to say. You're
going to have a lot to say, that's for sure.
I am. But Jamal might have more. Talk about ebbs and flows. We're on an ebb right now. Ain't nothing flowing. So so definitely excuse me. We appreciate you guys for watching. Appreciate you guys for listening. It's the Bet Online to Detroit podcast. You guys know how it goes. Live free. Fight on.